We have not had rain here in a hot minute. All the burn bans are back on, which is not unusual. Here in Texas, we go on burn bans a lot. So my gardens look a little special. I want to show you guys what I'm doing to help for round 2 and talk about fall garden, all the things that we're going to be working on and moving towards, potentially as the temperatures start to trickle back down. Really, I would expect our temps to stay in the hundreds for at least a few more weeks, and then maybe, if I'm really lucky, start dipping back down into the 90s. Wouldn't that be something? That means the garden's kind of taking a hit. It's expected. I knew it would. And so I want to make sure that I'm showing you guys some of the things that can happen when you have really a killing heat. The thing about gardening in the South is we don't necessarily have the same months where you have mild weather and a ton of rain and you have this lush environment. We have to make a lush environment a lot of the times. That takes a lot of water. When you end up in places where you may be asked to conserve more water because of the droughts and the heat, we have that happen often. So you balance what is needed to keep your crops alive and, you know, feed your family, and what's best for the community as a whole. That being said, there's certain times of the year that we actually do better. And so most would look at their frost dates as their like first frost date, for example. That's when we can't put all of our fun stuff that, you know, isn't frost hardy out anymore, and we probably have to pull a lot of it out because once you hit a killing frost, it's game over for a lot of our plants. But not all of them, which is where the fall garden comes into play. Some place like Texas and other southern states that get real hot, there's that weird balance, because I may get a killing frost at the end of October, November. It could be 70 degrees in December. We had an ice storm. Everybody knows about it. Everybody talks about it. We did not do so hot. I have a fireplace. That helps. Because of this, and knowing that our environment is a little different, frost dates are important, especially bringing your plants out, but we have to just kind of wing it a lot, and you're taking a lot of gambles. I call it the garden version of Texas Hold'em. You don't know if you're going to hold them inside or if you're going to take them out. I'm doing a few things to try and help out to give me another round of what would be considered a spring summer garden after the weather's dip back down a little bit, just a little bit, so that my tomatoes will produce. This happened to me last year too. I put a ton of plants out and they were doing so well for a couple weeks, and then they all died because it was too hot. And I thought I would just give up and try again next year, or well, this year, because it was last, anyways. But all of a sudden I had volunteer tomatoes pop up. I had a ton of them all over the place that resurrected themselves and came back to life. And it was towards the end of the summer. That made me think, okay, if this is how we're gonna do, because we're zone 8A, technically. I feel like we kind of borderline into zone 8B. We're kind of on that fringe, but because that's where we stand, I think I have to caution myself on sending things out too early and giving up on them altogether. So I got a fair harvest on some of my tomatoes up until the point that it got too hot. Now they're hanging on. Any of the plants that survive, and I'm gonna keep watering, I'm not giving up on them altogether. They look a little rough, but if they have green and healthy foliage, I'm keeping them. If they have a lot of blight, if they look really like this could be impacting all of my plants, I'll rip them out. But before I did that, I did a few things to try and make up for it. That's where this comes in. So I'm going to show you my adventure of what I'm trying to help myself with here. You know you shouldn't be out in the garden when it's so hot that there's not even golfers out there. I do what I want. Ooh, sad tomatoes. Clean you up. Hardcore cut them. Snippy snips. No mercy. Snippy snips.
seems mean, but I'm giving this little guy a chance by taking anything that might be taken away from his growth and energy. And saying goodbye. Ooh. And some of these will make very good sucker plants.
It's really hard to know when to chop and when to let them keep growing, but ultimately there are only a few suckers that were really worth trying to salvage. These are the suckers from the tomato plants. I like calling them the armpits because they're coming out of that little angle and it's the little one popping up here. Now when I'm pruning my tomato plants to try and give a lot of airflow, I just throw them on the ground and let them become part of my new ground cover, and it will eventually give back to the earth. But at this point of the year, at this point of the season, if I take those little cuttings and I do like I showed you and put them in water and they re-root, I could put them back out in the garden and potentially have more tomato plants without having to use any more seed. They're already started. There's hope for their success. If I can keep these inside long enough to get them big, put them into pots, and then I will harden them off, take them outside again, and replant. I learned some lessons this year. I feel like that's the best part about gardening is if you're not learning something, then you're not paying attention. Every year, every season, every time you plant anything or cook anything, you should be learning a little bit of something from it. If you don't feel like you are, step back a little bit and look. I bet you figured something out new this year. With my beds, I tried putting one row of tomatoes. I had a few volunteers that popped up out of nowhere, and just putting the plants on either side of the trellis, my giant panel trellis. But they didn't get quite enough airflow. And I ended up feeling like there was a lot of ground that didn't get covered. And that's not necessarily my goal either, because now I have empty space that I could have taken advantage of. What I think I'll do this next year is on the inside of my trellises, I will put all of my tomatoes down one row where they're just one after the other. And then on the other side, the other bed, I'll do the same so that I will have 2 rows of plants, but only on one side of the panel. So that way it can help with airflow. And because the tomatoes get put out before your peppers, usually, because you want it to be hot enough for them, I will let them grow up a little bit, then put my peppers out. And I can put the peppers on the other side of the trellis and all it's gonna do is help with the ground cover. And even truly, I could put more peppers on both sides of it, but I may have other things I wanna put. I always put marigolds. I put a ton of things for the pollinators. I just wanna make sure I'm giving enough room for the tomatoes to get the airflow that they need. And they have to grow up a little bit before I can put a bunch of stuff around them, or they won't get good airflow. And then we're back in square one. So, lessons learned. They need more space, they need more air, and I'm going to take advantage of my round 2. I don't necessarily think that I won't start as many tomatoes next year as I did this year. I'll probably end up starting more. But knowing that unless I have a pretty mild start to the spring and summer, I'm not gonna get a ton of harvest off that first round. I bet, and you guys can watch and see, I have a feeling we're gonna get the better harvest this next round. Thanks for hanging out with me. Y'all take care now. Bye.
This is what we call a Hail Mary. Tomato season.